to be part of an interdisciplinary team, especially from the point of view of a psychosocial clinician. And I'm very pleased to introduce our presenter for today. It's Binsi. She's one of our social workers. She's been with us for over a year. And she will be leading us through the presentation, and it'll be followed by a case presentation by Shreya, who is also with Pallium India. So I'm going to hand over to Binsi now, so that we can get on with today's presentation. And we will have an interactive session at the end to take any questions and to have any discussions that any of you would like to have. In the course of the presentation, if you have any questions, please put them into the chat box, or if you have any observations or anything that you'd like to share, and we will be addressing them in the chat box and bringing them up for discussion as required. So thank you. And
thank you, ma'am. So, ma'am, we are having around 15 new people joining in for today. So, I think you can introduce yourself through the chat option. We are starting our session for today. Over to Vincent.
So, thank you, Smriti ma'am, for giving such a lovely introduction. So, good afternoon. So, hope you're all safe in your homes or at your workplaces, I guess. So, in the last session, Ms. Priti have given a detailed overview regarding palliative care and also the importance of palliative care in current global health scenario. And also, she have introduced a new concept, that is the total pain. So, which is a new concept for everyone. So, she have explained well in detail regarding that, I guess. So in this session, I'll be dealing with interdisciplinary team in palliative care. So you all might have heard interdisciplinary team as well as multidisciplinary team, right? So according to you, is there any difference between this interdisciplinary team and this multidisciplinary team? You can share your okay. So you might have heard interdisciplinary team and multidisciplinary team. So is there any difference that you found in interdisciplinary team and multidisciplinary team? Yes, right? So what is the difference? Can someone please tell what is the difference that you found? Sometimes I have seen that the term is used interchangeably. So is there any difference? You can also comment.
Yes, there is a difference.
Okay. So Teresa is saying that there is a difference between interdisciplinary team as well as multidisciplinary team. So I to accept with her that is in an multidisciplinary team, the team members uses his or her knowledge or expertise to develop individual care goals. But in a multidisciplinary team, the team members uses his or her language, skills as well as knowledge to achieve a common shared goal. So in a palliative care, we uses this integrated approach to palliative care. That is, we focus on a common goal. That is, our goal is to improve the quality of life of patients as well as families. So hope you understood the concept interdisciplinary team in palliative care. If you have any doubts, please ask questions. I'll be pleased to answer. So, coming to the definition of palliative care.
Sorry, I was still trying to navigate. Is it okay to ask the question now?
Yeah, sure.
Sorry, yeah. See, when we say multidisciplinary team, they are like how we were explaining, they are not part of the interdisciplinary team. But in case we want a referral or something like that, say for example, a patient has got some kind of a vertebral collapse and pain because of that. So can we ask, and a neurosurgeon or a neurologist is not on board as an interdisciplinary team. So can we ask the multidisciplinary team as a referral in this case, or that is also not
that is
feasible?
No, it is done. In fact, what I think the difference also is that an interdisciplinary team, there's an overlap between roles. So for example, the social worker.
That's correct.
Yeah. Whereas a multidisciplinary team, you have teams that work in specific verticals. So yes, in our case, when we have a patient who has palliative care needs, but also has diabetes that needs to be managed, we will engage somebody who's a specialist and then bring them in. If I may just make a request of all our participants to also just keep putting your questions in the chat box so that we can summarize them at specific points as we go along, and then also address them together at the end. So that will be great, and we will take all the questions towards the end if that's all right, ma'am. Binsi, please continue.
Thank you, Smriti. So coming to the definition of palliative care. Palliative care is an approach that improves the quality of life of patients and their families facing the problems associated with life-threatening or life-limiting illness through the prevention and relief of suffering by means of early identification and impeccable assessment and treatment of pain and other problems, which includes physical, psychosocial, as well as spiritual. So this is the definition of WHO. So you all might have experienced a serious illness in your family or to your loved one, right? So is it only affect that particular person? No, right? It affects the entire family, entire biological rhythm of the family. So I would equate a family with a human body. That is, if an organ in a human body is not functioning properly, it would affect the entire systems, entire function of the human body. Likewise, if a member in a family is affected with an illness, it would affect them not physically, but also socially, psychologically, spiritually, financially, and in every aspect. So in palliative care, we focuses on improving the quality of life of patients by recognizing these problems and also to make effective solutions to these problems. So in 2018, Lancet Commission on Global Access to Palliative Care have defined the serious health-related suffering. So in the report, it was said that in 2015, out of 56.12 million people, 25.5 million people who have died experienced serious health-related suffering. That is, the burden of serious health-related suffering is increasing. It says that anybody with serious health-related suffering should have palliative care. That is, serious health-related suffering may lead a patient into physical, psychosocial, financial, as well as spiritual issues. So here comes the importance of interdisciplinary team in a palliative care. That is, no one professional can handle all these problems, as you all know. So here comes the importance of palliative care to tackle all these issues, that is psychological, physical, social, financial, as well as spiritual. So to improve the quality of life of a patient, that is our major goal, to improve the quality of life. So to improve the quality of life of a patient, a care team needs to work together utilizing an interdisciplinary approach to provide and implement a care plan that meets the patient's as well as family's goals and needs. That is what we do as an interdisciplinary team. Coming to the next. Why an interdisciplinary approach is important in palliative care? As I said before, no single expert can address the needs of the patient as well as the family. So if a patient is coming to palliative care, he may have some pain or any other physical symptoms like breathlessness. If a patient with paraplegia, he may have developed some pressure sore like that. So he'll be coming for his physical problems. So when we analyze in detail, we'll be able to understand that this physical pain had lead that patient or that person or that family into social, financial, psychological, as well as spiritual problems. So coming to the social, we need to look into their social problems. That is, how is their person living, or is the person isolated? Do they have any support from the community or society like that? Then coming to the financial, we know that healthcare costs have drive a lot of people to poverty, even to multi-generational debt. They will borrow money for the physical treatment purposes and all, for the health treatment purposes and all. They would borrow money from bank or something. So this will lead that family into multi-generational debt. I have witnessed many families who are coming here, they have many financial constraints. They have borrowed money from any person, sometimes more than 20 lakh rupees like that, they may have debt. So as you all know, initially if a person is diagnosed with some disease or illness, they may be going to this private hospitals or something. So as we all know, private hospitals are very expensive. So they would sell their land or property and all their means to treat that person. So they may have financial constraints. Coming to the psychological, what is the impact of a person's illness in their psychological level? We need to understand that. Sometimes in palliative care, most of the people may be coming with end of life or nearing to death like that. So the family members or the patient may be depressed, or they may be diagnosed with clinical depression or anxiety like that. So we need to address their psychological issues with a mental health professional or a social worker or a psychologist like that. So next comes the spiritual issues. So are they questioning? Sometimes they may question their meaning of life. That is, why this is happening to me? Or they may sometimes question their belief systems. I have seen many patients who have their belief systems have altered. Like that, initially they may be an ardent believer of Jesus or Lord Krishna or like that. So when this disease is affected, they will tell why this has happened to me. I was a religious person and I was following all the rituals of the religious institutions like that. Then why this happened to me? So this question, we need to address their spiritual concerns too. So hope you all understood the different problems that affects a particular person, and healthcare professionals have a shared role in providing person-centered care. So we always focus on patients as well as their families. So next, what are the benefits of an interdisciplinary approach in palliative care? The first one is better possible outcomes achieved through collaborative approach. So here, every morning we have interdisciplinary team meetings. So the doctors will be telling regarding the physical aspects of the patient, and doctors and nurses, then the social workers will bring into the table the psychosocial aspects, then the physiotherapist will deal with the physical exercises that could improve the strength of their muscles like that. So it is a collaborative approach of many disciplines so that we could get a possible outcome. That is, our aim is to provide a total care, that is a holistic care. Okay, coming to the next, improve healthcare processes and levels of satisfaction. So a multidisciplinary approach can improve healthcare processes and levels of satisfaction. So as a team, we are working together, best possible outcomes can be achieved. So this will create a sense of satisfaction in us as well as to the patient and their family. So these are the benefits of an interdisciplinary team approach. Coming to the next, it can reduce the length of stay in hospitals and avoid duplication of assessments. So it has been scientifically proven that an interdisciplinary team, when it is done correctly, can reduce the length of stay in hospitals. It is actually correct. And also it avoids duplication of assessment, which will lead into comprehensive and holistic records of care. So as many people are involved in a care, there should be proper records. That is, regarding the medical aspects, the doctors and nurses will be writing the physical aspects or diagnosis related issues, treatment plan and all. The social workers will be writing regarding the psychosocial assessments. So the physiotherapist may have physiotherapy notes and many other professionals who are involved in the particular care. So these are the benefits of an interdisciplinary approach in palliative care. So what is an interdisciplinary team? This I had explained before. That is a group of health professionals working collaboratively in a coordinated fashion toward a common plan of care for the patient. So I guess I don't need to explain it further. So it is already explained. And also in an interdisciplinary team, we share our responsibilities and promote role interdependence. That is, an interdisciplinary team does not mean that we only stick into our area of expertise. It is a learning experience. So when I could share my experience, initially when I joined Pallium India, so I don't know much regarding the medical terminologies like that. So for example, periambulary carcinoma, I was not aware about it. What is it, in which part it is affected like that. So when I asked doctors regarding it, so they told me that this is this and this like that, in this part it is affected like that. So then only I came to know about it, and also how much pain they have when they are with this illness. So it is important that we share our information with one another. It is an important role. It is an important part of an interdisciplinary team. Coming to the next, respect individual members' experience, expertise, and autonomy. So we all know that every person is unique. He or she may have different experiences in life, or may related sometimes work experiences. He may be an expertise in his or her field. So we need to respect each individual member's experience, expertise, and also autonomy. We need to respect all team members that as they focus on a common plan of care. So here comes our team members. So our interdisciplinary team consists of the following members, which includes doctors, nurses, pharmacists, social workers, physiotherapists, mental health professionals, art and music therapists, occupational therapists, volunteers, palliative care assistants, as well as caregivers. So they play a major role in palliative care. Coming to the doctors, they coordinate the interdisciplinary teams that ensures the optimization of care. That is, they are specially trained to communicate, guide patients and families through their difficult times. Coming to the nurses, their role is to monitor the patients, then pain management, administering medications, and also provide personal care such as bathing, dressing up, like that. Coming to the pharmacist, they play a vital role in palliative care, which includes timely provision of medications, and also the assessment of medication plans. Then social workers. Social workers conduct psychosocial assessments of patients as well as their families to determine psychological, social, financial, and spiritual problems, which helps in developing a compassionate care plan. Then comes the physiotherapist. So they mostly deal with patients with injury, disability, or a medical condition that limits their ability to move. So they test a patient's strength and ability to move and also creates a treatment plan. So their goals may include improve mobility and also reduce pain and restore function. Coming to the mental health professionals, as you all know, as I've said before, in palliative care, many people may have psychological issues, which may result from the physical illness. So they may have depressed or clinically, some of them may be clinically diagnosed with depression or anxiety. So we need mental health professional like psychologist or a psychiatrist in palliative care. Then comes the art and music therapist, then occupational therapist who will be dealing with the day-to-day activities, improving the day-to-day activities. Then comes the volunteers. So volunteers play a major role in palliative care. They can be said as a backbone of palliative care, and also they are the gatekeepers through which we enter into the community. I remember an incident which I would like to share with you. So here I'm working as an IP in-charge social worker. So I met here we were having a patient, a person who is 70 years old, who is an old man, and his spouse, who is 65 years old, was the primary caregiver. He was diagnosed with carcinoma, and he had a fracture in his left leg. So we have sent him to Medical College Hospital. So coming to the family background, he is having 2 sons. The elder son have died in an accident, and the younger son and his family was settled in Bangalore. So due to this COVID crisis situation, he was not able to come to the native land. So he was very emotionally very distressed because of that. So they went to medical, the patient as well as the primary caregiver went to the Medical College Hospital. So the doctors have advised surgery. So they have this, they need to have this health insurance card. So in a hurry, they forgot to take that health insurance card. It wasn't their home. That is nearly 80 kilometers. It was very far away from the hospitals, nearly 80 kilometers like that. So they were in a crisis situation. Only the mother knows where it is kept. So she should go. So as you all know, in medical college, we need a patient should have a caregiver. So immediately we have contacted one of our volunteers. So he was willing to come there. So more than 10 hours he stayed there in the hospital. In this crisis situation, that is in this COVID crisis situation, we all know in this situation, most of the people do not get out of the house, especially in hospitals. Like that, it is full of corona like that. Then that is the people will be telling. So this was a more surprising experience for me. That is the strength of our volunteers. That is, they are with us. So they are our constant source of support actually. So they play a major role in palliative care. Coming to the next, palliative care assistants. So our palliative care assistants are well aware about the geographical area as well as the area where the patient is living. So without them, we cannot reach into the community. So they also play a major role in palliative care. Then caregivers. So caregivers assist the patient in doing all the activities. So he or she is the source of comfort for the patient. And also, as I said before, we are an interdisciplinary team. So our patient and the family is also a part of a part of the team. That is, as we focus on patient-centered care, they are also they also constitute a major part of our team. So this is not the completed list actually. So anyone who can contribute to improve the quality of life of patient and the family is also a part of the team. So hope you all understood who are the team members and what are the functions and what are the roles that they play in palliative care, I guess.
Bincy, I'm just going to take a minute to answer a couple of questions that have come into the chat box. Because I suppose since a couple of people have asked these questions, it's likely that other people also harbor the same question. John has asked, what is the difference between a mental health provider and a social worker? While both of them do look into psychosocial aspects, but a mental health provider, a mental health professional, when we talk about them, we talk specifically about people trained in providing psychological interventions, which requires a certain level of training and skill development and qualifications, for instance, but it works on a continuum. And a social worker, while does look into certain psychosocial needs, there is a certain referral point. So a social worker might be trained to identify that there is a particular risk. For example, in our case, they're taught to identify when there's a suicide risk in the family, but they do not have the training to do the suicide prevention or the suicide risk intervention. That's when we call in a more highly trained mental health provider. The social worker also focuses a lot more on the socio-economic aspects, helping the family navigate the different subsidies that might be available, the different government schemes that are available, and also to facilitate social support in the form of getting in touch with the local panchayat, liaisoning between ASHA workers in the area and the family, and mobilizing the community and things like that. So there are very specific interventions that a mental health professional will also provide, which a social worker will not. But like I said, it works on a continuum of care, and there are certain referral points. So even for a psychologist, like I'm a psychologist, I might be able to tackle certain aspects. If we find that a person is depressed, I might be able to work with them to a certain point, but there might be a point at which they need psychiatric intervention in the form of medication, at which point I need to bring in a psychiatrist. So that's how the continuum of care works. Shreya had a question, which was that the team member list looks very impressive. Is this only in theory or practice? We recognize that this is an ideal list. So while this is the desirable list, not most organizations would not be able to fulfill this. So we, in practice, we do have a multidisciplinary team that comprises of doctors, nurses, pharmacists, social workers. We're lucky to have a very competent physiotherapists with us, and mental health professionals. And volunteers, palliative care assistants, of course, form a part and parcel of the service that we offer. We engage other therapists as and when required. We've had people who've come and done music therapy and art therapy with our halfway home patients and things like that on occasion, but they're not a permanent member of our staff. So is this the permanent team in practice? No, it's not, but we do have some fundamental players in place as we deliver our practice. So I hope I've answered your question, and if not, we will take more questions a little later. Bincy, please continue.
Thank you, Smriti. So I have a question. So according to you, who is the most important person on the team? You can either raise your hands or you can put it in the chat box. Who is the most important person on the team according to you? So Sia has told that the entire team, especially the primary caregiver, all are important than patient, caregiver. So it's a teamwork. All are equally important. As I too agree with your answers, actually every member is important in a team because they have different roles. So they are necessary to be a part of an interdisciplinary team. So my answer would be the person in the team who is able to be most helpful for the person at that point of time. That is, if a patient needs a hug, who is giving that comfort touch or a hug to that particular person? So he may be the important person to that patient. Sometimes, for example, for a starving patient, one who buys food will be the most important person for the patient. So hope you understand that concept. That's at a point of time who is able to be more helpful for that patient. That is the most important person on the team. So hope you understand the concept. So shall I move? So while working in an interdisciplinary team, we always sorry, can you please mute? Okay. So while working in an interdisciplinary team, we always focus on person-centered practice. That is, here we respect the patient's preferences, needs, and values. In palliative care practice, the patients as well as the family members are actively included, are actively participated in their own medical treatment in close cooperation with the health professionals. So a care plan is always based on the need of the patient, and it involves the patient as well as the family in all aspects of care. Then coming to the third point, avoids a paternalistic attitude. So we always, as a team, we always talk with our patients as well as our families. So sometimes we'll be making decisions for them, and we believe that we know the best for them, what is best for them, and we will not consider their opinion. We have to consider their autonomy because they are independent individuals and they have their own decisions. So we need to include their decisions in a treatment plan. So therefore, we need to avoid a paternalistic attitude. Then comes encourage them to speak up and contribute to decision making because they have voice. And as we follow a person-centered care, we need to encourage them to speak up. They knows what they want, what type of care, what type of medications they want. So according to their decision only, we need to prepare a care plan. So in palliative care, an interdisciplinary teamwork is practiced. That is, it ensures team members have clear goals and understanding of their shared roles and responsibilities within the team structure. And also the team members should have clear goals, that our goal is to improve the quality of life. So a team member should have a clear knowledge regarding what is their goal to that would improve the quality of life of the patient as well as the family. And also it should participate in joint assessment, diagnosis, and goal setting. Then comes encourage less experienced team members to ask questions to bring out creative ideas and alternative perspectives. Sometimes there are new team members who would ask many questions. So then only we came to know about many creative ideas like this or this we can do here, like that. So in my experience also, some interns maybe come to palliative care and they might have they may ask several questions. So then only I have thought about such things, that these are things that we can include in the care like that. So we need to encourage less experienced team members to ask questions so that we can bring about a creative ideas and alternative perspectives in a team. Next, establish teams with members from diverse disciplines to foster higher overall effectiveness. So I explained before. Then comes organize regular team meetings and debrief. This is also very important part of a teamwork, that regular team meetings is necessary. That is, in an interdisciplinary team, we need to meet every day. That is, then only we'll be able to create a plan. Then according to that plan, we'll be able to work out. And we have to create debriefs. That is cross-examination. What we have done, was it good for the patient, like that. So we need to organize regular team meetings and debriefs in palliative care, which is very important. Then comes communication. So communication plays an important role in palliative care, and communication across disciplines, care providers, and within the patient and their families and caregivers. So communication is not only with the patient, but also with the team, within the team, as well as with the patient, with the care providers, within the family members. We need to be very sensitive and communicate openly to encourage genuine collaboration. So we need to encourage them to open up, that is, communicate openly. What they feel, they have to say. So we need to encourage them to communicate with a genuine collaboration. And then comes document assessments and ensure clinical handover documents are completed thoroughly. So as everyone is part of the team, we need to take that the physical team, that is the medical team, will be taking the physical aspects, and the social workers will be taking the psychosocial aspects, like that. So we need to document our assessments, what we have taken, what we understood from the patient and their family. We need to document that assessments and ensure clinical handover documents completely as well as thoroughly. Then comes the role of a social worker in palliative care. So social workers play a major role in palliative care. So they take part in psychosocial assessments and many other related activities. So I may explain this with a case. That is, in IP, we had a 55-year-old female patient who was diagnosed with cancer. Initially, when she got admitted in palliative care, her goal of she had severe pain with 10/10 pain on her pain scale. She was admitted with the goal of optimization of care as well as pain management. So when the social workers, when I have conducted a detailed assessment, I was able to understand that she was having 2 daughters, and elder daughter was married and living in a different house, and the younger daughter, younger daughter's spouse had committed suicide, and again she got remarried, and it was also a utter failure. So currently with the patient's younger daughter, her spouse, and also the younger granddaughter staying. All of them are staying together. And at present, the current source of income for the family is only that income of her, that is, the younger daughter was working as working for daily wages. So that was the only source of income for the family. That is, she is getting rupees 250 per day. So through this income, she's managing all the activities. So when she comes in palliative care, she had physical issues. That the physical issues, that is pain as well as headache, like that, many other related problems. Then coming to the psychological, I understood that she was emotionally distressed. When inquired about the reason, she told that I'm completely distressed because of thinking about my daughter's family marriage failures and like that. Then coming to the social aspect, there was no supportive system in the community as well as in the society. Then coming to the financial aspects, they had financial constraints. There was no proper source of income for the family, only the daily wages that her younger daughter is getting. She too had this physical issues, that she had the breathing related issues, that asthma or something. So coming to the spiritual aspects, she was telling why this happened to me. I was a strong believer of God and I was following all the rituals and like that. Then why this has happened to me? So it is the social worker. When a patient comes to the palliative care, it is the role of social workers to take a detailed assessment by considering all these aspects. So this is the primary role of a social worker. Second one, after taking a detailed assessment, we the social workers we eventually builds a rapport with the patient as well as the family. It is through employing by the skill of empathy and also active listening, we build a trust in them. That is, then only they will be open up their problems, their emotions like that. So building rapport is very important. Then only they will open up their problems, so that this will result in creating a trust in them. Then social worker also plays a role of a counselor. That is, counselor may be personal or social counselor. That is, a social counselor would educate them what are the resources in the community. Then a personal counselor may deal one-to-one person like that. If a patient or a person is needed any emotional support like that, he'll be dealing with it. Then coming to the family, that is, if there is any conflict exists in the family, so we can arrange family meetings like that. Then comes crisis or grief. That is, as I said before, people who are coming in palliative care may be nearing to their end of life, or suffering from serious health related suffering like that. So the family members will be in grief. So it is important to address the grief and provide necessary counseling for the patient as well as their family. And also comes rehabilitation. So after the disease management, when they go back, we can educate them what are the resources available in the community. Social workers are actively engaged in the rehabilitation process of a person or of a patient as well as their family. Then comes the bereavement counselor. So counseling is provided to the family members who have lost their loved ones. This says that our care does not end with the death of the patient. So bereavement counseling is an important role of a social worker. Then coming to the last point, that is patient navigation. So this is an important role of a social worker. Sometimes a social worker may take the role of an advocate, educator, or a facilitator. So patients have their own rights and needs. So we need to advocating for the rights of the patient is an important role of a social worker. Then comes the educate, that is regarding medical diagnosis as well as prognosis. Sometimes if a patient coming to palliative care, they may don't know regarding their diagnosis. That is, doctor may be telling that it is cancer like that. So they don't know what is it. So sometimes doctor may be telling them with clinical terminologies. So we need to explain it in simple terms. What is it? What is cancer? How it is affected? And what are the implications that it is? What are the implications for it like that? So regarding prognosis, what is the outcome of this disease like that? So it is our duty to educate them regarding diagnosis as well as prognosis. Then comes facilitate. So it is the role of social worker to facilitate regarding the resources and opportunities. So it is our duty to act as a facilitator regarding the resources and opportunities which is available in the community or in the society. Next comes the mobilizer or networker. The social worker acts as a mobilizer or networker. That is, we always follows the person in environment approach. That is, person is influenced by their environment. That is, if a patient with paraplegia is coming to our palliative care, sometimes he may need a wheelchair. So we'll provide that wheelchair. But we need to look into that aspect, that whether when they are going back, they'll be able to use that. That is there any ramp or something so that this wheelchair could be used so that they could move independently. So whenever we are doing an intervention or anything, we need to consider that person in environment approach. Then only we can provide them a proper care. Then comes the licensing with government and non-governmental agencies. So there are many governmental schemes available for patients. So it is our duty to educate them regarding all the schemes and all financial assistance. So here we had a patient with paraplegia, and he needs financial assistance. They had more than a debt of around 20 lakhs or something. So I had written a story regarding their financial constraints and all, and sent it to a group of people who does charity related works, that is financial. They often provide financial assistance to many of the people. So like that we can do in our setting. Then comes connect with the healthcare system, emergency medical support. That is, if a patient is coming from a faraway place, he may sometimes due to some issues or something, he may not able to reach our our setting. So we can arrange them, we can connect it to them, connect them into CHCs or nearest PHCs, like that. So these are the various roles of a social worker in palliative care. So there is my presentation. So hope you have understood the importance of an interdisciplinary team in palliative care. We are working together as a team, and our focus is on improving the quality of life by focusing on the different aspects, not only the physical, but also it includes psychological, social, financial, as well as spiritual. So we are combining all this thing. That is, we always focus on the total care or the holistic care. So hope you have understood what I told. So thank you.
Thank you, Binsi. That was a very, very clear presentation, and I'm sure we have a lot of discussion ahead of us. If you can stop sharing screen, then perhaps we can move on to the next part, which is the case presentation that Shreya is going to make. Very quickly, I just want to address a couple of points that were brought up in the chat box while the presentation was on. Several people have asked about different things related to communication and rapport building, and at what point should we be telling the family that the situation is far advanced, or the patient is, the prognosis is that the patient will pass away, and so on. I just want to bring to everyone's attention that we have put in all these different modules in the coming weeks. We will be specifically tackling communication and communication of bad news. We will be specifically tackling collusion, which is something also that somebody else has brought up, saying, what if one of the family members says that they don't want the prognosis to be conveyed, or even the diagnosis to be conveyed because of the status, the mental health status of the family member. So all of these topics will be specifically covered in the sessions to come. There is also a question about shouldn't palliative care be part of every hospital and clinic? Absolutely, I think it should be part of it. Unfortunately, it is not a part of it because it is not taught. And it's only now in 2019 that the Medical Council of India introduced certain elements of palliative care into the medical curriculum, which comes under something called AIDCOM, Attitude, Ethics, and Communication. In addition to that, they have started a module on end-of-life care and physical pain management. So these are all very new concepts, even in the fraternity. And while we believe that we need to integrate palliative care into all of healthcare, and we're working towards it on all fronts, it is still far from a reality. And another point there to make is that in low and middle income countries like India, the need for palliative care is far more, because we don't have the robust systems in place that are there in other countries that look after certain specific cohorts. For instance, in our practice in Pallium India, we also look into people who've had spinal cord trauma. We have about, I don't know, at some point we had about 40 odd patients in our care. We also have children with congenital anomalies and so on and so forth, like I had mentioned in my first session. So the needs are vast, and I think it'll be a long way before palliative care is integrated. But the way palliative care is structured, or the elements of palliative care, are the kind that can be absorbed into any kind of practice. So I would say that our job as palliative care advocates will be complete when when I'm out of a job and there's no need for a palliative care specialty, but then everybody imbibes these basic elements. So I'm just going to pass this along to Shreya from Pallium India to take us through the case presentation. Shreya, and then we will come back to a discussion with the larger group. Thank you.
Thank you, Smriti. Thank you, Binsi, for such a lovely presentation. It was so detailed, and yes, you did a brilliant job. Let me just share my screen. So without the case presentation, a session is incomplete in the echo format. So this would be, we would need active participation from all of you to answer these questions, because I'm not just going to talk about the case, I'm going to put in a few questions in front of you. So, and we would need involvement from the interdisciplinary team here. We have doctors, nurses, social workers, counselors, physiotherapists, volunteers, everyone on the group. So looking forward to your active presentation. Smriti, if you could assist me with the chat box, that would be great. Thank you. If you all can see my screen.
Yes, Shreya, we can see it.
Okay, thank you. My name is Shreya. I'm the Resource Mobilization Manager. I'm working at Pallium India for the last 14 months. So today we are going to talk about Satish and his family. Satish is 39 years old. He's diagnosed with traumatic paraplegia. We've changed the name of the patient and the family members to maintain confidentiality. So a little bit about background about Satish. Satish is 39 years old, diagnosed with traumatic paraplegia. He met with a bike accident 7.5 years ago and became paraplegic. He was an electrician and was the sole breadwinner of the family. To come to a discussion point, what would be the role of a doctor? It could be a doctor from any discipline or a palliative care physician in Satish's plan of care. Any suggestions from all the doctors in the group? I'm going to go back. He is diagnosed with traumatic paraplegia. He met with an accident 7.5 years ago. And what would a doctor or a palliative care physician do in Satish's plan of care? What would be the role?
So there are some statements coming in, assessing physical concerns, Satish's physical concerns. Avatar has said more focus on rehabilitation from the point of view of rehabilitation. Rajni has seconded that, rehabilitation. Vasundhara says first line of treatment would be after assessment. Rehabilitation is advised. Rajni has made a very valid point to avoid infection, and immediate medical concerns first is something that Pearlie has said. So you can, I think, move on from there, Shreya, I think.
Yes.
We have all the most relevant concerns laid out.
So let's talk about the illness history and their experience with the healthcare system so far. He has been bedbound due to UTI since the last 7 years post the accident. So he's been having recurrent UTI. And also because he was expecting to recover soon, he was sent to many hospitals. So they kept telling him he'll recover. And due to that, the family had visited various hospitals that they would end up spending half the month in a hospital. So what is the role of a physiotherapist and a nurse in Satish's plan of care? Any suggestions? Going back to Satish again, you can see he's had recurrent urinary tract infections. He has been sent to many hospitals in the past. They've been spending a lot of time in the last 7.5 years in the hospital. So how would a physiotherapist or a nurse help in Satish's plan of care?
So some of the responses coming in are, well, there is some medical terminology: regular CIC, if not able to urinate by himself; prophylaxis; prevention of bed sores, very valid point; frequent turning; the use of a water bed are some of the responses coming in, Shreya.
Okay. So I'm going to move on. Thank you. So about the psychosocial history, Lata, Satish's spouse, is his primary caregiver. They have 2 children, Arjun and Anisha. Arjun is his 12-year-old son, and the younger daughter is 8 years old. Currently, there's no earning member in the family. Lata is uneducated, making it difficult for her to find a job. By uneducated, sorry, she's not had higher education. Also, as Satish is bedbound, Lata is unable to get involved in any other activities like finding a job. So you can see the family is struggling and have lost all hope. They have support from extended family members. However, there's no financial support because their extended family also not able to help them financially. And also there have been suicide ideation with Satish. So what would be the role of a counselor, psychologist or a psychologist in the family's plan of care?
So Avatar has said that mental health counseling should be promoted of all individual members. Jolton has said psychosocial rehab. Answers are coming in very quickly. Medical support, rehabilitation, treat depression, psychological distress assessment, counseling for all members. Depression screening should be done.
Thank you. So now I'm just again put all the problems and all their issues in a total pain box. So you can see in the physical, they're clearly very unclear about their prognosis because they've been given hope that they may recover soon. There's also discomfort due to UTI. There's obviously lack of mobility because he's been bedbound due to severe UTI. Also in psychosocial, you can see they have an anxiety about the future. There is suicide ideation. In socioeconomic problems, you could see there's no earning member in the family. They are worried about the educational expense of their children. They have lost savings due to repeated hospital visits. Lata is unable to find a job, and she's the primary caregiver for Satish. And there is no financial support from the extended family. In the spiritual aspect, you can see they were strong believers in God, and they couldn't understand why they're suffering so much. And there's also a loss of hope. So I'm going to come back to this slide again. So you can, we'll come to the questions now. My first question would be, how will an interdisciplinary team work towards the family's plan of care?
So there are already some interesting comments that came in after we moved on to the total pain slide. And Parul has said that Lata can do paper bag making, wick making, or other skills which need no education. Social support, Rajni has said, for long-term assistance. Keshav had said crisis intervention for suicidal ideation and identify suicidal thoughts is something Kausalya said. Understand the mental health condition for counseling for all, rehab activities for uneducated caregivers, help them identify charitable organization who could possibly support them, and need to find out what Lata can do and arrange for financial support. So it's great. People are coming at it from very, very holistic perspectives. And parents are always bothered or worried about their children and their future, some Shreya has said. So yes, I think, I mean, now you're pretty much coming back to identifying mental health issues and so on. So people have covered a very sort of 360-degree view. So, yeah.
So what other disciplines other than the doctor, social worker, nurse, what are the other disciplines that can assist this family? And what interventions can help Satish's and Lata's family? We've already got a few suggestions. But what are the other disciplines that can support and assist the family?
Nivin says occupational therapy for Satish, physio for mobilization, Rajni says. Avatar has talked about identifying and segregating problems on a most needed basis. So basically prioritizing the urgency of the issues would be an important thing. So look for a philanthropist to sponsor the education, says Alpa. Vandana has said social worker.
Thank you. That's a really great suggestions.
Very comprehensive. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll come back to that once people get a chance to talk. So some of the interventions that we were able to do was first, we had the home care team reach out to them. The home care team consisted of a palliative care physician, nurse who visited them, and also provided medicines for their care, especially for the UTI. We also had the physiatry team visit. We have a team that visits patients, which consists of a physical medicine and a rehabilitation doctor, a physiotherapist and social worker, and a nurse. That they visit people with any kind of spinal cord injuries or strokes on Wednesdays of a week. And so the team visited them. We have a halfway home facility, which is a rehabilitation facility, which started with a facility for people with spinal cord injuries to come and stay with us along with the caregiver and learn rehabilitation techniques, wheelchair transfers, physiotherapy, some sort of vocations. So Satish and his family were admitted in the halfway home. Also counseling was provided to Satish. Because you realize they would have no income, we also were able to get a food kit which had the monthly rations for them. Educational support for both children. As you can see, there was no income, so we were able to mobilize educational support for both the children. Vocational rehabilitation, we're still, Lata is interested in goat farming, and so that's under process right now. She was included in our gender equity project. Also, a wheelchair was provided along with the wheelchair skills in the, were taught to him in the halfway home. And also CAFO, which is a knee, ankle, foot orthosis, was provided to him. And also due to the financial constraints, we've mobilized volunteer support. So I think one of the important disciplines were volunteers to get them to help Satish and Lata. And so we were able to mobilize volunteer support to get, to help them out. Thank you. Now we can come back to the discussion.
So yeah, we've had some very interesting and very relevant inputs from everybody. And Parul has consistently also given different ways in which vocational support can be done. So sewing machine, and she's mentioned a couple of other things, wick making and so on earlier. She's also mentioned education support fees directly to schools. So that was something that was undertaken through our educational support program, where we liaison directly with the schools in question, and then the fees is paid directly to them. And Shreya mentioned a gender equity program. That is a program we run. It's called Ujjwal, where it's for, I mean, not just women patients, but also women who are caregivers and who are in precisely the kinds of situation that we find Lata in. And so once they're brought under that program, then they are provided assistance on several domains. It could be vocational rehabilitation in the form of poultry farming, goat rearing, helping them open up a little, a little petty shop right out, I mean, as part of their household, things like that. Or it also looks after basic food, water, shelter needs, if there's a renovation that is needed in their home, or educational support, and also physical and medical aids, that or even interventions if there's a surgery that is required that they couldn't afford, and so on. So that we find, like Binsi said, it's a systemic problem. So if the patient is has this condition, then it affects the whole family adversely. So we try and approach the problem from a systemic point of view, and so every member in the family is given the attention that is appropriate to them. So prioritize, yes, the priorities vary from time to time. In the case of Satish, of course, his physical distress needed to be addressed immediately, and that was done. And in some cases, we find that the patient and their families live in extremely distressing conditions, like they barely have a roof over their heads and stuff. So in that case, from a psychosocial perspective, that is also prioritized. Regular grocery is provided. So Shreya had mentioned that we provide a monthly food kit. That is something that we support a lot of families with. The food kit is made up of rations, dry rations, rice, lentil, and it's a whole kit that makes sure that the family doesn't starve, and they're given that on a regular basis till such a time that they are able to support themselves, either through established vocational rehabilitation and so on. So Shreya, would you like to sort of elaborate a little bit more on what the current status of the family is?
Currently, they are back home. So we have the team who worked with Satish. We have Vaishak, who's the physiotherapist at Pallium. Vaishak, I would request you to give in your suggestions so others can learn from what you had done with the patient.
I see that Shahana has raised her hand. So Shahana, we will come back to you in just a moment.
Am I audible?
Yes, Vaishak.
Okay. Once Sadish had admitted in the halfway home, first we haven't started physio during the first initial days. What we have done is we have constantly given him some motivations, and we have studied how the relationship between his wife and both of them together. That means in many cases, like in spinal cord injury, in Sadish's case, it is a chronic case, but some of the acute cases where we are seeing is that if a partner get a spinal cord injury, the other one, in not in all the cases, but some cases, but a lion's share of cases in India, it is evident that the partner will abandon the injured one. The main reason for that may be some kind of satisfaction or less, something like that, but or inability of that. He may be the injured one, may be the breadwinner of the family. Due to some financial constraints, the partner will abandon. So we have to understand how the relationship is going. So we find that Sadish's wife Lada is fully means she is giving 100% of her care to the husband. So the next step, what we have done is we instruct them to do simple exercises like uh, getting away, like from supine to sitting, like long sitting, bedside sitting, etc. That we monitored. We taught his wife regarding that, and she performed all these exercises. Once they are uh, used to that, we have given them a wheelchair, and since he's a paraplegic, he can easily transfer from bed to wheelchair. But for the first time, he is doing while he got admitted in Pallium India. Last 7 years, he haven't done that. And once we have given the wheelchair, he is able to move like that. Wheelchair transfer is easy for him. So at a point, we made him independent, that without any support, he can move from bed to wheelchair without anyone's support. But the only thing that limits his movement is his urinary tract infection. This infection is there for last 6.5 years, and majority of time, like Shreya told, like majority of the time they were in the hospital. Like one of the saddest thing that we heard is their children doesn't at a point of time they used to call their grandfather and grandmother like mom and dad. They don't even know who is the exact parents, like that, because they're most of the time they were in the hospital. And they also have like 5 or 5.5 lakh debt in one hospital, their nearby hospital. It is a multi-specialty hospital, but uh, they are not able to pay that money also due to financial constraints. So only if the UTI subsides, we are able to make him move, or some kind of rehabilitation can be given. We have also provided a KAFO, that is knee ankle foot orthosis. He is able to stand also. In my opinion, or my opinion, if he is not having a recurrent UTI, we can provide, or we can optimize, or we can improve his physical conditions a little bit. Like now he is having a suprapubic catheterization, that is catheterize that in the pubic area they have inserted the catheter directly to the bladder. So that itself making a limitation for his movements. Even if he is turning to right or left side, this catheter will block, or it will get painful for him. So that also make him difficult for the movements. So he is having some kind of spasms. The movement is very much restricted. So we have to reduce that. The medication is going on, and his spasmic medication is skeletal muscle relaxants are going on. Once it is reduced, we have to improve the physical care and treatment. But
Thank you,
the
Vaishak. Sorry.
most fortunate thing is his wife is very much supportive, and she is always with him. Thank you.
Thanks, Vaishak. We also had Binsi work on the case. So Binsi, if you would like to share your views as well, and then we can continue with questions.
Okay. So last day I had called him actually. So it was as he was an electrician, he was started to engage in preparing jobs and all. So he was happy to spend time with his children. He was able to contribute quality time with his children. So he was very. I was able to observe that he was seemed very pleasant and usual.
A question has come in saying, UTIs often worsen mental condition in patients. And is Satish safe from a mental status point of view? So I think it's safe to say that his urinary tract infection was brought under control. And given the fact that he has been, so many different aspects of his distress have been addressed, Mausumi has asked, how has the depression of the patient been managed? So if you look at the overall snapshot of this family, 39, right, Shreya? Yeah, a 39-year-old man who's supposed to be at the peak of his youth. I mean, not youth, but whatever. He's at the peak of his life. To be in a wheelchair for 7 years, and if you heard Vaishak say that he was not taught how to transfer, he wasn't able to transfer from a bed to a wheelchair till he came to Pallium India. 7 years into his treatment, that was not done. assaults on our personhood when we have an illness is on our autonomy. And if your autonomy is snatched away from you, especially at a time like this, it is bound to lead to several ramifications, right? So the fact that he is now able to transfer himself, he's re-engaged with his prior vocation. The other thing is that his children didn't see him enough to even know who their parents were. The fact that their hospitalization, the amount of time in the hospital has come down, the family are together now. So all of these go a long way in addressing his mental status. And we've seen a vast, sorry, is my network acting up? Shreya, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Right, sorry. So all of these different approaches go a long way. Now, also Parul, once he's trained to see skill in which he can earn some income, he will regain confidence. Yes, part of our physiatry team's objective is to enable people who have paraplegia or quadriplegia to re-engage vocationally. So a few years ago, we had 6 people with paraplegia finish a course in becoming chefs. They became chefs, and then we've had several such successes. And yes, that has gone a long way in improving their overall quality of life. Just one question that I would like to ask all of you, which is something that I know was assessed in this case, is very often, in palliative care, or especially in Pallium India, we have the concept of the invisible patient. We have the patient who has the diagnosis and who is our focus of care, but there's always an invisible patient in the family. And who is that invisible patient who gets overlooked? The caregiver. Yeah. So very often it's the caregivers, and sometimes it's the children. Sometimes it's but usually it's the caregiver. Now, especially in the case of young people who have spinal cord trauma, I mean, not necessarily young, but people who had spinal cord trauma, one of the recurring psychological issues or distressing issues we see is sexual intimacy issues. And that is a space that is very uncomfortable to address for a lot of people. How do you address sexual intimacy issues in a couple that is already grappling with so much in life, right? And what does that mean for the caregiver who is also still young? In this case, they have children, but in many cases, we have seen that the couple has just recently gotten married. It's an arranged marriage. This girl has probably never met her husband before she got married. A couple of months into the marriage, he's had an accident, and he's then quadriplegic, and that's it. Her job for the rest of her life is to be by his side and care for him. Now, I'd like you to think about that person for a moment, right? And what does it mean for that person to forfeit any kind of dreams that she might have had from that relationship? And very often we have also seen that this issue, when it is not addressed and when it's not acknowledged or sensitively addressed, in many cases, this causes a different kind of dynamic where the person who is using the wheelchair or who is bedbound becomes suspicious. Why is this person still with me? I'm sure that she would like to, there's an insecurity that sets in. So there's a lot of different dynamics that we need to look into very sensitively. This is not an easy conversation to have. And a lot of the times we are not trained to address these conversations in that way. So people shy away from it. So that's just something for you all to consider. Is that one of the reasons why they're abandoned? It's possible. It is in many cases, yes, the person, the spouse who is young and who has just sort of come into this marriage has left because, there is a gender disparity in those decisions also. Very often the woman stays on. Very often the woman stays on. Training is needed, yes. Counselors can help the spouse here. So there are many very valid points that are coming in from all of you, and it's great to see that all of you are so engaged. Vaishak has addressed the bed sore question that somebody has asked, that he had 2 bed sores, grade 2, one in the sacral region and one on the trochanteric region, but now it's subsided. His wife is also caring and she used to position him. So yes, empowering the family to be able to care for the patient appropriately is very important. Oftentimes the caregiver distress comes from the fact that they are helpless. They don't know how to be of appropriate assistance to the patient. But once you impart that skill to them, it brings their distress levels down considerably. So Shreya, back to you.
We can, any other questions, if any of the audience want to talk, ask any questions or give their suggestions.
I think Shahana had raised her hand. Shahana, do you have something to say? Shall we just unmute you?
Ma'am, there's no response from her.
Okay.
Anyone else would like to share any experiences?
Hi, can I?
Yes, please, Vandana.
Hi. Okay. So, you guys must be knowing that I'm counseling at Tata Memorial Cancer Hospital, and the question of physical intimacy is really a big thing there, because as it is with cancer patients, there's this stigma attached that, you know, a lot of people sometimes believe it's contagious. And like one of the participants said, that a lot of abandonment also happens. Men generally tend to leave their wives, you know, when they have cancer. So I personally, as a counselor, I do a lot of talking. I emphasize a lot about physical intimacy, because that's a very important part of a marriage. So there is a huge need for us to be open about it and talk about this, because a lot of times they won't come up to you and ask. They won't, because they're inhibitious. So as a counselor, it's very important for us to raise this issue with them and make them aware about how things can come. I'm talking about only cancer patients. I haven't dealt with others. So how things can come back to normal after a certain time. So that kind of puts them in an easy space and helps them deal with the situation in a much better way, because a lot of time patients come from very rural backgrounds, and for them intimacy is a major part of the marriage. So talking with the patients is extremely important.
Thank you, Vandana. Thank you. I'm so glad you shared that with us. And thank you for the work that you do. I'm sure it's a great boon to a lot of, and a relief to families to have someone like you to talk to. And that's something that we find, that even though it's an uncomfortable topic, once it is addressed sensitively, of course, there is a sense of relief that somebody has seen the distress that they're facing, and it's not something that's swept under the rug. Nobody's talking about it, therefore they can't talk about it, and so it just festers. Pearlie had asked a question: how did the wife respond to vocational training for her? Pearlie, when we go about organizing vocational rehabilitation and vocational support, we place the choice in the hands of the person who is the beneficiary. So it's not us going and imposing and saying, hey, we're going to give you a bunch of goats to look after. No. If that's going to add to her burden, her load, then obviously that's not the most appropriate. So very often we work with the family to find out what is most appropriate in terms of investment of time, investment of effort, and usually one of the biggest areas of distress for them is that their children can't go to school because they don't have educational fees. So once the educational support is in place and the food kits are in place, that does give us some time to maneuver and then the physical distress is addressed. And so that does give us some time to maneuver around what is the most appropriate vocational rehabilitation. So we're not inadvertently adding to the burden rather than taking away from it. Can you specify the duration of counseling needed for patients such as Satish? I can't say that there's a specific duration. Just as the needs change as per the trajectory of the condition. So like in any illness, the needs change from time to time. It depends on various circumstances. It depends on how so oftentimes, you have this intense period of physiotherapy and so on, but when patients go back to their homes, maybe they don't keep up to that schedule because of various reasons and so on. So the needs vary, and I would say that the counseling needs will need to adapt, and it'll be a lifelong relationship. So we have had people in our care through our halfway home program for many, many years, and some of them for over 8-9 years. And it is a relationship that we see Pallium India having with them and their family for as long as they're alive and as long as we're around. And so we're in regular contact with them, and the counseling continues as and when required. Shreya, you have raised some. Yes, sorry, Alpa, please go on.
Yeah. So I would like to add one of the counseling experiences which I had recently. It was the same case because of the disease. One of the spouse was bedridden and the other one called me. Not immediately, but she was continuously asking me, what is a good time? I want to discuss something very important. But with her body language, we could make out like she was not able to open up when we were at the hospital to see the patient. So one fine day she called me. She said, there's something very delicate, but I just thought I should ask. And she says, is it all right? Because my partner is also fine and I would like to have relationship with another person. So I told her, have you thought about it, the repercussions of it? Because you already have growing children and all these things. But she was convinced. She said, yes, definitely. I've seen all of those things, and that's how I've come to you. I just want to know, is it okay to do it or not? And the spouse, she said so well. She said, I've spoken about this to my husband. He said, I won't be able to give this satisfaction till I leave this life. So definitely you can go ahead. You've been my caregiver, you've been my wife, but let this be secret between us and the person, third person who's coming into it. And they're comfortable and they're continuing with this. Not everybody would come and share such things, but as a counselor, when they see that we give them that window to vent out, they come at that convenient times and they open up. And even today afternoon, she had called for something else, some other help she needed, and she inquired about that. But still, they stay connected and they gain a lot of confidence when you tell them the right thing or wrong thing, what she was doing. Because I told her very clearly, see, this is not the right way to take it. But she said, when we both have looked into it and we are very clear with what we are doing, so I don't think anything. So if I said, if that is the case, then you can go ahead. So that was the thing I just thought I should share here. Yeah.
Thank you, Alpa. And that is, that is actually more than anything else, it is a testament to how wonderful your rapport was with this person.
Yes, exactly.
Come and confide something that is so sensitive, and probably something that she cannot share with anybody else for fear of stigma and ostracization. And well, she will be labeled a lot of different things by society.
Yes, I told her everything. See, what all the repercussions will be.
But at the end of the day, the fact that you were able to still, I mean, even after laying out the different societal repercussions, the fact that you did it without judging her as a person, I think that is what is needed. Because if we put ourselves in that person's shoes, it's I wonder what we would have, what options we would have thought for ourselves, right? So the fact that there is an open channel of communication, I think itself is a wonderful thing. And I think our job in the care provision circles is to really hold space and listen. And I know that a confession like that would in many cases just have a knee-jerk reaction where she would be shunned, and that would just add to her suffering even more. We see a lot of families, there is, I mean, like I said in my first presentation, 1 in 5 suicides in India is committed by a person suffering from a chronic illness. And also caregivers, it's a huge statistic. And why is that? Because they have nowhere to go. They have no one to talk to. There's no one to appreciate their plight. So I think the fact that you're there to listen is just absolutely wonderful. Rajni, I'm just going to quickly address something that Rajni has asked. What happens if the caregiver does not want to work? So in medical ethics, which I think ethics anyway in general, which is going to be covered later, we have of course beneficence, non-maleficence, autonomy, and justice. And we are able to support our families, the families. And there's a reason why she doesn't want to work. You've cited tiredness. Why is she tired? Maybe because she doesn't have network of the community or in other ways that were not available to them earlier. But there is
Smriti ma'am, there's some issue.
Smriti, we've lost you. Okay, I think it's already 4:29, and we can get back. Shreya, you had some questions which we'll get back to as well. So kindly, please fill in your feedback, and I've shared the feedback on the Google chat. We'll share it on the WhatsApp group as well. Thank you so much for being such active participants, and it was great to hear inputs from all of you. And I'm going to save this chat and go through it again, because while presenting it, I couldn't see some of really interesting inputs that have come in. So our next session is on 18th of September, which is taken by Teresa. I can see her in the background. She'll be taking a new session. She's a social worker. It's great to get experience from on the field, people who are working on the field. She'll be talking about laying the foundation of good practice, and looking forward to your support again. And please feel free to reach out to any of us if you have further queries. And thank you so much. And we will see you again next week. Have a good weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Binsi. Thank you, Manisha. Thank you so much.